because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being, who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself. I think at the end of the day, people are going to reject this bigoted, divisive figure.
I'm just giving you the answer to the question you're asking all night long. Why do they vote for Donald Trump? It's not always because they like him. No, it's because stuff like that is kookier.
Bill Maher just tore into Adam Schiff in what was far from a typical late-night jab. It was a brutal verbal takedown that left the room stunned. It all began when Schiff, feeling unusually bold, launched into his familiar anti-Trump spiel, branding Trump a self-absorbed narcissist who only cares about himself. Nothing new there, but Schiff didn't stop. He escalated, claiming Trump was clearly guilty of every accusation ever made against him and insisting he should never be allowed near the White House again. That's when Maher struck back, not just throwing shade, but delivering a full-on eclipse of Schiff's outrage.
I think it's true justice. The only thing he cares about is himself and money, and going after the money is a way to bring about some real justice.
Then came the drama, so intense it could have closed a Broadway play. With a dire tone, Adam Schiff warned that if Trump ever returned to power, it would be game over for democracy. His message? Asterisk fear Trump. Fear the future, fear everything. Except facts, apparently. Asterisk while Schiff painted his usual apocalyptic picture. Bill Maher sat there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, ready to strike. And when he did, it was brutal. You could almost hear the gears grinding to a halt in Schiff's head. The issue with Schiff is simple. He plays the same worn-out record. Doom without documentation, drama over data. It's all performance. No policy, panic without proof. But just when you thought he couldn't dig the hole any deeper, Schiff dropped a line so outrageously self-righteous it practically begged to be torn apart. And Maher didn't miss a beat. He seized it, exposed it, and dismantled it with razor-sharp wit that left marks. Schiff may have thought he was entering a safe space, but he walked straight into a buzzsaw, and Maher made sure everyone saw the sparks fly.
I don't share your pessimism about this or your pessimism about the general election. The reason why Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump is because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being, who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself. I think at the end of the day, people are going to reject this bigoted, divisive figure.
Schiff kept firing shots at Trump like he was trying to win a roast battle. But instead of landing punches, he was swinging at air. He threw out every insult in the book, desperate for something to stick. But here's the kicker, the line that's probably echoing in his head at 3 a.m. With full confidence and puffed-up bravado, Schiff predicted Joe Biden would easily win the next election. Bold move, right? Fast forward to today. Plot twist. Donald Trump is back in the Oval Office. That smug prediction aged worse than gas station sushi. What once looked like a confident flex now feels like a comedy sketch that crashed and burned. And Schiff? He's now scrambling to spin it like he didn't just completely fumble on national TV. It's poetic justice in 4K. Meanwhile, as Schiff droned on his monologue, the tension in the studio was thick. You could practically see Bill Maher fighting the urge to roll his eyes into the next dimension. But then came Stephen A. Smith, and he didn't hold back. Before Maher could even clap back, Stephen A. dropped the filter, laced up the verbal gloves, and let loose. He tore into Schiff and his political allies, calling out their obsessive, years-long crusade to take Trump down, from shady media hits to endless investigations. Stephen said what many were thinking. They tried everything, threw the whole playbook at him, and still lost. The sting of that truth hit harder than anything Schiff said all night.
I'm just getting tired of seeing so much stuff targeted in his direction, but somehow, some way, he still survives. I mean, we're talking about a situation where he's still going to be the GOP nominee. He's still going to be running for president. You're President Biden. That's the individual that you're going to have to beat. 4 indictments, 91 counts. They ain't even bringing up the bankruptcies, ain't even bringing up this particular issue with this civil case, and somehow, some way, he puts cats to shame because he clearly has more than 9 lives. I mean, come on.
This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a full-on beatdown backed by facts. Stephen A. Smith wasn't worried about ruffling feathers. He came locked in, gloves off, and ready to drag Schiff's entire operation. His energy was that of someone done pretending, done playing nice. And Schiff? Let's just say if the cameras weren't rolling, he might have headed for the exit early. They pulled out every Trump controversy from the vault, tossed around wild comparisons, even placing his name next to some of history's darkest figures. He's been called everything from a threat to democracy to the root of every national crisis. And yet here he is, not just surviving, but thriving. Against all odds, every hit job, every prediction of doom, Trump has flipped the narrative. Now he's louder, bolder, and, to his critics' dismay, nearly untouchable. The more they try to cancel him, the bigger his crowds grow. He's the glitch in their political matrix, a force they can't control, predict, or ignore. Love him or hate him, one thing is certain. Trump has become the unsolvable political mystery, and it's driving his opponents crazy. After sitting through Schiff's never-ending anti-Trump soliloquy, Bill Maher had enough. He snapped. No polite pushback, no soft corrections, just unfiltered chaos. Maher went straight for the jugular. No warm-up needed. He told Schiff exactly what millions think, but no one on cable news dares to say. This is why Trump keeps winning. Maher slammed the Democrats for pushing empty promises and tone-deaf policies, accusing them of losing the plot, more obsessed with moral lectures and performative outrage than actually solving real problems.
Atlantic put out an article last year, and it was called "Separating Sports by Doesn't Make Sense."
Right.
And talked about how we separate sports like the WNBA just because it's just socialization. This is insane.
I agree.
Okay. That's why people vote for Trump. Mm-hmm. Because there's stuff like that on the left that people just go, I know Trump's horrible, but separating by sports by makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And if you think it doesn't, you can't leave the country.
While Democrats are busy preaching, Trump is speaking directly to regular people, loud and clear, and that, Bill Maher said, is exactly why voters keep pulling the lever for him. Maher didn't sugarcoat a thing. He laid out raw. The left isn't losing because of Trump's lies. They're losing because of their own arrogance. Every time they dismiss the concerns of average Americans, they fuel the very movement they're trying so hard to stop. Take one of the most eye-roll-inducing moments in recent memory. The Democrats pushed to erase biological distinctions in sports. They doubled down on the idea that men and women should compete head-to-head, no questions asked. For a huge swath of Americans, this wasn't just confusing, it felt like an insult to basic common sense. But instead of listening to the backlash, instead of even pretending to hear the public out, they played the same tired card, branding all criticism as hateful bigotry. They ignored legitimate concerns and marched forward like nothing was wrong. That's not leadership. That's delusion, and Maher wasn't having it. He called it what it is, ideological overreach. It doesn't inspire, it doesn't unite, it repels. It turns off voters faster than a bad campaign ad. Maher summed it up perfectly. Asterisk. When people feel like the only choices are chaotic dogma or someone who at least speaks in plain language and lives in reality, they'll choose reality every single time. Asterisk, and right now, that choice is Trump. But then came the twist. Did Adam Schiff really just throw Joe Biden on the bus? Because what he said next raised eyebrows across the room. A subtle shift, maybe, but in a moment packed with tension. Even a small crack in a party line says a lot.
I take the opposite view. I don't think he should have given the pardons at all.
Really?
No, I don't think he should have, and I was vocal about that at the time.
Can you refuse a pardon?
That's less clear because in the case of the January 6th committee, he pardoned essentially the whole committee.
While trying to distance himself from the fallout of January 6th, Adam Schiff, knee-deep in the committee investigations, let slip a comment that raised eyebrows. It sounded suspiciously like he was quietly stepping away from President Biden's leadership altogether. Schiff, along with the rest of the panel, conveniently walked away with political immunity, essentially handed a pardon while they spent months pointing fingers and dishing out guilt. The irony? Thick. The timing? Sketchy. The message? Clear. Schiff is playing a new game now, and Biden might be the next one under the bus. But here's where things get really shady. If the January 6th committee was truly as righteous and evidence-driven as they claimed, and if their findings were so ironclad, then why did President Biden feel the need to hand out preemptive pardons like party favors? That move alone sparked more questions than it answered. It undercut the credibility of the entire investigation and made it look less like justice and more like a carefully staged political cleanup.
So the FBI came in and arrested the judge. Now, I haven't heard that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever read arrested a judge. So is this significant?
Well, I think
I'm not going to comment on something I don't know more about than what you've just told me.
You read about it too.
Yeah, I mean, I read about it, but I don't know.
So you don't trust anything either, and you work for the New York Times.
Well,
Now Schiff's out here try to play it cool, brushing off the pardon like it was no big deal. Like Biden just got a little trigger happy with the political protection pass. He won't say outright, but the way he sidestepped around it says plenty. Biden may have panicked. And just like that, Schiff ends up biting the very hand that bailed him out. Trying to shield himself from political blowback, he subtly throws Biden under the bus without ever saying his name. Classic DC double play. 1 minute you're wrapped in a safety net. The next you're acting like it never existed. But people noticed. Everyone noticed. And trust, Biden's team didn't love this little public display of selective amnesia. Schiff might think he's being slick, threading that political needle, but the seams are unraveling fast. The cracks in his act are loud enough to echo across the aisle. And Bill Maher? He pounced. No hesitation. He didn't just call out Schiff. He dragged the entire media circus with him. Maher torched mainstream outlets for abandoning journalism in favor of partisanship. He said what millions have been thinking. They're not reporting the news anymore. They're choosing sides. Even Bret Stephens, a columnist at the New York Times, couldn't keep quiet. He publicly admitted he's not sure he can trust his own paper's reporting. Let that sink in. A senior writer questioning the credibility of the headlines being printed under his own roof. It's a rare moment of honesty, and a damning sign of how far the media trust gap has grown.
Catholic schools are popular now, even with people who aren't Catholic, because it's the last place you can send your kid to get an old school education. And they just tell the kids, forget about the Jesus stuff. Just, to them, that's okay indoctrination, as opposed to some of the other indoctrination that goes on. And also, the Catholics don't put up with bullshit. They take your phone. You have to learn your P's and Q's and your grammar and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I just don't understand, that parents don't have the whip hand anymore. Not that you should actually use a whip.
When insiders start raising red flags, you know the rot runs deep. And that right there is exactly why Trump's base keeps growing, why millions of Americans have tuned out legacy media and gone searching for something real, something raw, something that can't be spun by talking heads on cable news. At this point, it feels like nearly every major news outlet in America has been hijacked, especially by the left. These were once respected institutions built to challenge power and hold truth above all else. Now, they're backup singers for political agendas, parroting talking points like it's karaoke night at the DNC. It's hard to stomach. Journalism, the so-called backbone of democracy, has started to resemble a Broadway production, just with worse writing. Every time a trusted media brand stumbles, it's not just an error. It's another illusion shattered for millions who once believed the press was on their side. And for a growing number of Americans, this only confirms what they suspected all along. If you're truly searching for truth, you won't find it echoing down the polished corridors of establishment media. You got to dig deeper, question everything, and look elsewhere. The unraveling didn't begin overnight. We all remember the shift, when Democrats went full throttle into woke politics, tossing aside traditional values and basic common sense like yesterday's news. That's when the cultural glue started to peel away. Suddenly, kids were being held up as miniature moral authorities, while parents, especially fathers, were reduced to punchlines. Flip on any modern family sitcom and you'll see it. The clueless dad, the know-it-all teen, and a total lack of structure or balance. This isn't just entertainment. It's a message, one that's quietly rewriting how people see the world. The values that once anchored families and held communities together are being swapped out for feel-good slogans and identity politics. What used to be real is now scripted. What used to be sacred is now the joke. And people are noticing.
I respect the fact that you don't share my pessimism. I truly do. I understand where you're coming from. But I think that's part of the problem. I think the Democratic Party should share my pessimism. I think they should be on high alert. I think they need to treat him with the seriousness that it deserves, because you having a lot of faith in the American people. The man did get over 74 million votes. You've got people that are looking at Joe Biden. I'm not going to call him a cognitive mess or anything like that. That's very disrespectful. I would never speak about our president that way. But when you're 82 years of age, it's not offensive to say you're no longer a spring chicken and you don't seem to.
You know the setup by now. The clueless, bumbling dad. The stressed, semi-capable mom barely keeping together. And of course, the all-knowing, sarcastic kid delivering zingers like a mini stand-up comic. At first, it felt like harmless fun, classic sitcom humor. But over time, the joke turned into a cultural script, What started as punchlines slowly evolved into a message, and people absorbed it. Entertainment quietly became indoctrination. Suddenly, rules were optional, respect was considered outdated, and consequences became negotiable. Kids weren't just characters anymore. They were cast as the new moral authorities. Discipline got rebranded as oppression, and traditional family structure was tossed aside like expired milk, replaced by flashy virtue signals and trendy progressive slogans. Now, we're living in the fallout. The family unit, once the foundation of society, has been sidelined, and the cracks are showing everywhere. This cultural shift didn't just alienate conservatives. It confused moderates, pushed independents away, and cost Democrats dearly. The 2024 election loss wasn't some shocking twist. It was years in the making. Don't just take our word for it. Even some Democrats saw it coming. They just didn't say it out loud until it was too late. The reckoning hit hard. Adam Schiff and his allies had spent years selling the fantasy that Joe Biden was sharp, steady, and fully fit to lead. They swore by it. They deflected every concern, ignored every red flag, and told Americans there was nothing to see here. But there was, and they knew it. When reality finally broke through the media bubble, the narrative cracked, and with it, so did the party's foundation. Biden wasn't the leader the country needed. And deep down, even his biggest supporters saw the writing on the wall. Cue the chaos. With the walls closing in, their big fix? Kamala Harris. A last-ditch pivot that backfired instantly. Her approval ratings didn't just dip, they cratered like a meme stock after a bad earnings call. Her speeches bombed. Her appearances went viral for all the wrong reasons. And her attempt at leadership only made the disaster more visible. What was meant to be a comeback became a crash landing. In a desperate attempt to salvage credibility, Democrats propped up Harris like she was their secret weapon. But instead of saving the day, she made it worse. The so-called party of strategy started looking like it was freestyling with no beat, no plan, and no vision. They embraced fringe ideologies, discarded logic, and stood behind a president clearly unfit for the moment, then doubled down when everything began to unravel. With Harris front and center, they managed to alienate the very base they once relied on. Voters didn't feel heard. They felt insulted. The frustration voiced by Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith wasn't personal. It was national. They said out loud what millions have been thinking. Americans are done with the gaslighting, tired of being fed stage-managed speeches, and sick of being blamed while the people in power avoid all accountability. Trump's staying power isn't some weird political glitch. It's a mirror, a reflection of a country exhausted by spin, lies, and empty narratives. The left tried to control the conversation, but you can't suppress truth forever. Facts don't care about talking points, and now, even voices on the left are starting to question everything they once defended. That wraps it up for today's video. If this message hit home, smash that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. We've got more truth, more fire, and a whole lot more to expose. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.